Hey, I'm Enrique from Elektron, and today I wanted to show you what the Digitakt II is all about. I'll give you a quick overview of its features, show you how it works, and show you how you can use Digitakt II in as simple or as complex of a way as you'd like. All right, let's dive in. Digitakt II is a 16-track sampler with MIDI sequencing capabilities. It comes loaded with a ton of fun ways to explore sequencing, sampling, and music making. You access your 16 tracks across the bottom and edit the samples loaded onto each track using these page buttons and the 8 encoder knobs, which represent the values shown on the screen. Now say we want to get a simple beat to play along to. That's easy. We'll select our track, press record to enter the step sequencer mode, and lay down some triggers. Now when I press play, or say you wanted to play something in, we'll just hit record and play in a snare. Or say we wanted to get a little bit more dynamic with our playing. I'll select track 3, which is our hi-hat, and I'll access one of our new trigger modes. Holding down function and pressing down, we can go to velocity trigger mode. This will give us 16 different levels of velocity when it comes to playing our hi-hat sound. Now, I'll give ourselves a little bit of a count in, turn on the metronome, and I'll make sure that quantize is on, but just for track 3, not the entire pattern. And we'll maybe back it off just a little bit so it's kind of on, but still has a little bit of that human feel. Now, a big update from Digitakt to Digitakt II is that it's now stereo through and through. So on track 4, I have a flute sample, and I'm going to just go into keyboard mode and play this back. And with Digitakt II, we have a total of 10 octaves that I can push this sample and play it either chromatically or within a given scale. I can select what scale I want here. Right now we're at C4 in the Aeolian or a minor scale here, and I'm going to leave it here and play something in. So we'll hit record and play. Here we go. Now I'll shape it up with the filter, hit filter page, turn down our filter frequency. That sounds good. Now on track 5, if I look at our sample that is loaded, it looks a little crazy. That's because it's a single cycle wave shape. And here's another thing to note. All the sounds that I'm using right now come pre-loaded on Digitakt II. So we have different drum loops, we have single cycle wave shapes, even wavetable wave shapes that we can use. And you might be wondering, what is a single cycle wave shape? Well, Digitakt II, being a sampler, we're using a sample of an oscillator from a synthesizer. It's just a single cycle that, when I turn on loop mode, will then let me play this like a synthesizer. But what's great is I still have all my synthesis shaping capabilities. For example, a filter, even a filter envelope, and then I still have the amp page with a full ADSR envelope, or if I want, an AHD, which is great for more percussive sounds, or again, no rules apply, right? We can make this as cool as we want it to be, but I'll stick with the ADSR, lower down our sustain, bring this back a little bit. And if I really wanted to push things far, in our mod page, we have 3 different LFOs that can be set to a number of destinations, even modulating other LFOs within these LFOs, if that makes sense. So I can have 2 modulating the rate of LFO 1, or 3 changing the depth of LFO 2. You can do a bunch of wild things, but we'll stick to something simple for right now. Awesome, same thing. Let's go ahead and play something in. Now open up the filter a little bit. That sounds great. Now let's say I'm running a little low on the brain juice when it comes to sequencing, right, and my creative output. Well, I can leverage some of the tools on Digitakt II, for example, the new Euclidean mode, to kind of keep things moving forward and keep things interesting. So on track 6, I have this little percussion sound. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down function and go into our sequencer page. Here I can turn on Euclidean mode. And a quick overview of what Euclidean mode will do is I can set how many steps I want. So in this case, we'll say 16 steps. And then within those 16 steps, I can try and evenly place this amount of pulses within those 16 steps. So I'm trying to evenly place 5 steps within 16 steps. Sounds crazy. It's this mathematical crazy thing that dates way back, but we've added it here and it comes up with really cool results. Or let's try something even weirder, right? We'll go with 10 steps and I'll try to place 7 steps within those 10 as evenly as possible. Let's see what this sounds like. And we don't need to stick to things like a bar or 2 bars. We can even do wilder things like, let's say, 13 steps and try to fit 7 steps as evenly as possible within 13 steps. Let's see what this sounds like. Here's something really interesting to note. So you might have seen that within those 13 steps, it actually reset rhythmically. That's because I have Digitakt II set up so that every track can have its own pattern length. Now, I still have a pattern reset amount, which says 32 steps. So every 2 bars, no matter what wildness is going on between each of the tracks, they will always reset after 2 bars. And this could be as long or as wild as you want it to be. So for example, we can say every 771 steps, reset. Don't know what measure that is, but it now exists, right? And if you really wanted, you can turn this all the way up till infinity and just have it say, just keep going, let it all just fall apart and come back in on its own. But to keep things a bit more musical for this demonstration, we'll stick to 32 steps. Okay, so we got a Euclidean pattern that we like. We can easily save this as a permanent pattern by holding down function and turning Euclidean mode off. But let's take this sound, which is just a simple percussive sound, and really push it a bit further. Digitakt I introduced machines. We have different machines for what we want the sounds and the samples to play through. We have, for example, one shot, warp, kind of like warp, but it's a little different, which is why it's spelled with an E. We have a new stretch machine, which is the classic time stretching algorithm, repitch, and grid. But one thing that's new with Digitakt II, if I hit right, we have different filter types. So we can swap between different filter types. Right now, we have the multi-mode loaded, but I'm gonna jump over to my favorite creative filter, which is comb. Press yes, go to our filter page, and now, if I press play, we'll turn up our feedback and lower the frequency, and you can start to hear that it sounds like a delay. That's because a comb filter essentially is a delay. So as I start playing around with this, you can start hearing that it brings out new tones and timbres. Now let's push the sound even further. I'm gonna go to our LFO and select our destination as our comb filter frequency. And I'll set this to a random shaped LFO, and I'll also set this to a hold mode, which means every time a trigger happens, it's gonna hold that value of the LFO and not continue to follow it until it receives another trigger. And we don't need much. We'll just push it a little bit, and you'll hear that it starts creating this weird sound. Watch this. Now we'll shape that up a little bit using the amp envelope, shorten it down. And another thing to note is that we have a creative filter here on filter page 1. But if I go down, we still have a bass width filter. So there's 2 filters on every track running in serial. So if I really wanted, I can push up our bass here, which is acting as a high pass filter, and then lower our width, which is acting as the low pass filter. But these move in conjunction with one another, which is a fun way to kind of explore sounds again. But I'm gonna use this in more of a corrective manner rather than the creative. So shaving off a little bit of low end. All right, let's bring it all in. All right, now let's really kick things up a notch and make it as complex as we want it to be, right? So I have this pattern here and I want to resample the entire pattern into a new pad and then chop it up and layer it back up with the original pattern. And we can do this. We'll go over to our sample page here. If I press play, we have our source set to main, left and right. We can choose either individual tracks or the inputs, but for this example, left and right. We want to resample the internal sound. Levels look good. Now, I'm going to arm our recorder, and our record start is set to play, which means when I press play, it's going to start recording, and I have it set to 32 steps. I just want to sample 2 bars. So let's go ahead and do that now. Sweet, so I have our pattern sampled. I'll just hit yes. We can call it whatever. I'll hit the settings button to call it something random. Plastic luncheon, sure. Now we'll go ahead and save that to track 16. Now we're going to go ahead and mute all the other tracks of our pattern, jump over to track 16 where that new sample of our pattern lives, and place a step down on the first step and press play. So this is now playing the sample of our pattern. With our machines, I'm going to go over to grid, and I'm going to slice this up in a grid of 16. And then I'm going to place 16 different steps down and say yes and create a linear lock. What linear locks will do is then add these slices in a sequential order. So you'll see it run across here. Watch this. Now we could try something interesting with random locks, which will assign the slices randomly, but for now, I'm going to stick with linear locks. Now let's go ahead and take our pitch down 1 octave. That's fine. Now let's shape it up again with our envelope. We'll lower the decay, make this really plucky. Awesome. We'll turn up a little bit of bit reduction, maybe send it off to the reverb. Sweet, and now let's bring everything else back in. Thanks for checking out Digitakt II with me today, and if you have any more questions about this or any other Elektron products, go to sweetwater.com or contact your Sweetwater sales engineer.